We need to talk about ideas, good ones and bad ones. We need to learn stuff about the world. We need an honest, intelligent, thought-provoking, and entertaining review of what the hell happened on this planet in the last 7 days. We need to sit back and listen to the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove.
Hello there, dear listener. We're back, the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove podcast. I'm Trevor, the Iron Fist. Over there is Joe, the tech guy. How are you, Joe?
Surviving.
No, Joe's not good. He's, like myself, a sufferer of Crohn's disease, although his case is much worse than mine. And so, yeah, commiserations, Joe, for a tough day. But anyway, you're here, and if you disappear, we'll know why. Yeah.
Yep.
So yes, dear listener. Last week, well, I did mention 2 weeks ago that I've been busy with this new role as a body corporate chairman, and that certainly kept me busy. I have to admit, there wasn't a lot of things to talk about, but boy, has that changed in the last few days with Israel deciding that they weren't picking enough big fights with people and decided to kick off another one by picking a big fight with Iran, and, of course, the retaliation and, of course, the reaction by different people is fascinating. Joe, we live in Orwellian times with the different spin that people put on these things, as we'll see later.
I'm sure they'll be arguing that Iran was sponsoring Hamas and therefore they're merely continuing the war.
Yes, that'd be one of the things. Although their main reason for doing it, according to Netanyahu, is that, to paraphrase, they've got weapons of mass destruction and we need a preemptive strike in order to stop them from killing us down the track. That's essentially the justification that's given.
As it has been for every attack they've done on nuclear installations.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to get into pretty much the nuts and bolts of all of this, what happened, what have people been saying, what's the background, what's the stories that the mainstream media are not saying, what instead is the propaganda that they're putting forward, and what are the various ways of looking at this issue. You'll be an expert on this conflict if you stay tuned for the next hour. So if you're in the chat room, say hello. Might not be that many people, given we've been it's supposed to be a weekly podcast. It's fast becoming a fortnightly podcast. Anyway, one can only do their best. That's all I'm trying to do here. So Scott's away, so he's not going to join us. Right. Okay. Well, let's sort of just kick off with, what's happened. Well, if you picked up the Sunday Mail in Queensland on Sunday, you would have thought nothing's happening because the front page, the top half was about Cameron Munster leading Queensland in the state of origin, and the bottom half was an ad for a holiday in Japan. Israel decides to, Joe, do we call them bombs or missiles? What's the difference again?
Bombs are basically gravity,
Yes.
and missiles have their own propulsion.
Right. Okay. So these are missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read just the Courier Mail, the Sunday Mail front page, you would have thought nothing was happening, but indeed things have been happening. So Israel claims Iran is developing nuclear weapons and Israel must strike now to defend itself. That's their key
Well, they've been
argument.
developing nuclear weapons for a long time.
According to Netanyahu, they've been a month or two away from having nuclear weapons for the last 30 years, Joe. This has been a Netanyahu thing for 30 years. We'll get onto the history of their nuclear program shortly. So Israel, the Israeli strikes hit nuclear facilities and civilian buildings and killed several top Iranian military commanders and a bunch of nuclear scientists. And, of course, Iran retaliated. And as Chris Hedges wrote, Israel and its neocon allies believe they can eradicate Iran's nuclear enrichment program by force and decapitate the Iranian government to install a client regime. So this is all part of their plan, is to bring about regime change, not just disable a nuclear weapons program. And as he points out, Iran is the 17th largest country in the world, with a landmass equivalent to the size of Western Europe. It has a population of 90 million, that's 10 times greater than Israel, and its military resources, as well as alliances with China and Russia, make it a formidable opponent. Joe, this isn't just like attacking poor Palestinians in the West Bank or in Gaza. This is a different kettle of fish entirely. How did you describe it earlier on?
Well, I was saying I wondered whether this was Netanyahu's Operation Barbarossa.
And I didn't know what that meant, and you said that was?
That was Hitler's invasion of Russia or the Soviet Union in the Second World War. So having he thought defeated the Allies on the Western Front, decided to open up another front in the war and just roll over the Red Army, and turned out to be his undoing. If he concentrated purely on Western Europe, he'd probably still be in power. Well, he'd probably be dead, but you know, the Third Reich would still be a force to be reckoned with. Yep,
just got too cocky and bit off more than he could chew. And maybe the Israeli Zionists have done that on this occasion with Iran, because Iran's not going to be the pushover that a lot of these smaller countries have been. So, incidentally, why was it called Operation Barbarossa?
It was after Frederick Barbarossa, who was a German emperor, Holy Roman Emperor.
Right.
From 1155 until 1190.
Right. There we go. Right. John says in the chat room, Benji, I guess he means Benjamin Netanyahu, is probably close to the truth about Iran's nuclear ambitions, I guess, but missiles are not helping. Iran needs to be seen to be getting nukes. We'll talk about how close Iran is with its nuclear program. We'll get to that, John. Yeah, what did Netanyahu say? Following the attacks that he launched on Iran, he put out a statement accusing Iran, so this is Netanyahu, accused Iran of genocidal rhetoric, which Iran, has backed up with a program to develop nuclear weapons. The hypocrisy of this, Joe, is breathtaking, because Israel, as we all know, has an unacknowledged nuclear arsenal, and its leaders are presently committing genocide in Gaza while spouting genocidal rhetoric. So the very things he accused Iran of, undoubtedly Israel is guilty of those very things.
I mean, Israel having nuclear weapons is probably why it hasn't really been invaded.
Yes.
Since the 70s?
Yeah, probably. One of the reasons.
Yeah.
You know, the hypocrisy in all this, so much as this will come down to, yeah, but, you know, Israel are the good guys, so we can do whatever we like, and the Iranians are the bad guys, so it doesn't matter that the circumstances are exactly the same. They're just brown, crazy, uncivilized mongrels over there, whereas we're
but what about the Iraqis?
Yes. The hypocrisy in this is just astounding. And if you've been following this podcast, dear listener, for 9+ years, when we come to different moral arguments, really you have to be able to state a case that in the situation of A, B, C, then X, Y, Z applies. The less exceptions you have, the better. But, you know, it should be able to be applied to any entity, and just simply saying, well, of course that applies to us but not to you, or vice versa, is not a moral system. And, so much hypocrisy in this coming up. So that's what he said. Iran, genocidal rhetoric, and an unacknowledged a nuclear program. So, what is the situation? What do the Americans think of the Iranian nuclear program? Do they think that the Iranians are close to producing nuclear weapons.
When you say the Americans, are you talking about the intelligence agencies or are you talking about the government?
The intelligence agencies. What do they
that
think?
we don't know.
Well, we do.
Do we?
We do, Joe.
Oh, okay.
So we've got, the Director of National Intelligence. Is that good enough, Joe? Even though it's Tulsi Gabbard?
Well, yes. I don't know.
But what is a Director of National Intelligence?
She's supposed to be the person who takes all the feeds from all the different intelligence agencies, collates them and presents them to the president for his actions.
Yes. Wouldn't it be handy if less than 3 months ago she gave a statement at a Senate Select Committee on what the US thought of the threat of Iranian nuclear weapons was at that time? Wouldn't that be handy if we knew?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we do. She actually did. 3 months ago, this is what she had to say.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
There we go. So that was a bit soft. Don't know if you heard it correctly, but she said the IC, which is the intelligence community, continues to is it?
I thought it was the
US
I was going to say it's because the International Atomic Weapons Agency
would be a
are the
different
ones
entity.
who normally monitor this sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't expect, when we say, how can you trust the information you get? And you'd kind of expect that the US, if they had an inkling of the Iranians up to mischief, they'd be prepared to play it up as hard as they could, you would think. So kind of when somebody says something positive about their enemy, you would tend to believe it, is what I'm saying. Like normally, and that's what Iran is to the USA, is the enemy. So I'll just repeat it. So she's referring to the IC as the US intelligence community, continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorised the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. The IC, the intelligence community, is closely monitoring if Tehran decides to reauthorise its nuclear weapons program. So that was only, Joe, 3 months ago. So John says Gabbard is more of a passenger of intelligence. So, So, but, a country like the USA and its intelligence community, I would have thought would make a mountain out of a molehill if there was anything to indicate that the Iranians were up to stuff. And the fact that she says that is pretty damning. All right. What else can we say? Yeah, it's all...
Well, the UN's nuclear watchdog is... So it's the International Atomic Energy Agency. Says they've been unable to determine whether the nuclear program was exclusively peaceful. So that's what the UN has been saying.
And, we'll just digress briefly here, but, there was an agreement in place where Iran said, we will limit our nuclear program to these specific things, and you can send inspectors in and check that we are doing what we're saying we're doing. And in return, the world will let us trade with them again, and you'll lift all of these sanctions. And that was a deal that Obama put in place. And it was also co-signed by quite a few European countries, or maybe the European, some European sort of connection there in terms of, and it was working. And of course, Trump comes along and goes, that's an Obama deal, it's a terrible deal, and unilaterally cancels it. So when so then Iran goes, well, for a while there, Iran actually just kept up with the undertakings of the agreement, even though the US had pulled out of it.
Yeah.
But after a while, I think after a few of their leaders were assassinated, they said, maybe all bets are off now. So when we say that that nuclear agency you just mentioned, Joe, can't be sure of what's happening, that's because of fucking Trump cancelling a deal that was perfectly adequate at the time. And he's now trying to encourage, Iran to the table.
Make a new deal, yes.
Make a new deal because he stupidly cancelled the previous deal. And,
he wasn't getting enough bribes out of the previous deal.
And by the way, when the Iranians, after all that happened, you'd see various headlines in the papers about Iran breaching its nuclear deal. And it was like, well, of course they might be breaching it because Trump cancelled the deal and they're no longer getting the benefit of the lifting of the sanctions, and the sanctions have been reimposed. But no, that was never mentioned as part of that. So, yeah, all part of the backstory of this saga, dear listener. So, yeah, in 2003, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. And in 2025, Iran has weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. And this has been a key thing of Netanyahu for 30 years, saying that Iran is months away from making a nuclear bomb. So here's a good clip of Mehdi Hassan talking about the hypocrisy of what Iran is accused of compared to what Israel actually does, and how basically Israel is saying to Iran, you can't do what we're doing because you're the bad guys and we're the good guys, essentially. So so here's a good clip of that. Here we go.
If you're watching Western media coverage of the Iran-Israel crisis, you might be witnessing a rather upside-down, topsy-turvy, bizarro view of the world, of reality. You're not being told everything. You're being given skewed perceptions. For example, if you're watching Western media coverage, you might come away with the impression that Iran attacked Israel out of the blue and Israel is responding, when it's the other way around. We all saw on Thursday night that it was Israel that launched an illegal act of aggression against Iran. Iran is the victim here, Israel is the aggressor, but in the Western media coverage, Israel is the victim always. Some other points you may miss while watching Western media coverage: for example, Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, Israel does. Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, Israel isn't. Iran has allowed IAEA inspectors into its country, Israel doesn't. It's a nuclear double standard that I raised with former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon a few years back on my Al Jazeera English show Head to Head, in a clip that's recently gone viral again.
How many nuclear weapons does Israel have? Because experts say it's anywhere between 80 and 400.
So what?
So what?
Yeah, so what? Has Israel ever threatened...
Do you recognize the hypocrisy of Israel having a secret illicit nuclear weapons program that it won't open up its doors to and won't talk about, and then lecturing everyone else in the region about nuclear weapons?
Absolutely not. You know why?
You talked about hypocrisy. Let me ask again. If an Iranian guest came on my show and I asked him about Iran's nuclear program, he said, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about it. Would you be okay with that? You'd be outraged.
Of course
and
I
yet
would
you
be.
sit here as a former minister of the Israeli government saying, I don't know, never talked about nukes with anyone.
Because there was like 16 United Nations Security Council resolutions against Iran.
And there is against Israel. And there is against Israel as well.
About
your nuclear program?
No.
Yes, there is. UN Resolution 487. Let me read it to you. The UN Security Council in 1981 says, calls upon Israel urgently to place its nuclear facilities under the safeguards of the IAEA. Why haven't you done that?
Because...
There you have it, the nuclear double standard. Israel violates multiple UN Security Council resolutions when it comes to its own stockpile of nuclear weapons. And yet Western media interviewers, who have multiple Israelis on air all the time, never really ask about this, never really ask about Israel's nukes. Why? I get why Israel wants to maintain its policy of nuclear ambiguity, of not confirming or denying that it has nukes. But why does the US media, the UK media, the Canadian media, why do they all have to go along with it?
Because they're all captured, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
It just...
Because it suits their interests.
You know, the Israeli Zionists just do not see these Palestinians, Iranians as people. They see them as something less. So, yeah. John, you're right, Trevor. That deal was working. Iran is not going back now, which is why I think Iran thinks it needs to at least look like they're getting nukes. Whether they succeed or not is beside the point. Yeah.
Well, it's true enough. Ukraine only got security assurances back in the 90s because they had nukes. And as soon as the nukes were gone, the West walked away from that agreement, as did Russia, obviously. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Ukraine said it was going to start a nuclear research program, not with any real aim of getting nuclear weapons, but just to get a bit of leverage on the international community, so that because we recognise that nuclear weapons are horrible, horrible things, Western governments will bend over backwards to make sure that other countries don't get them.
Well, it's working for North Korea.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the few things they've actually managed to do is maintain that threat of a nuclear weapon, and consequently, for the most part, other than sanctions, they leave them alone.
South Africa tried to during apartheid.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened to that, actually.
I think they there was a lot of collaboration between them and the Israelis at the time. Yeah. So, yeah, the hypocrisy of these people. Of course, that was good work by that interviewer. He was spot on in addressing that hypocrisy, and he's had his facts, and so good work. But of course, we're going to be faced with subtle propaganda from different groups or media outlets as we are watching news. So it's going to be, Joe, I've seen more reports in the Courier Fail and on television about poor Israelis who are sheltering in bomb shelters and suffering from bombings in the last few days than I'd seen about Gazans in the last month. The coverage in comparison. So it can be more subtle than that. Here's one. I'll play this one here that I've got a clip of.
Iran has launched a wave of airstrikes on Israel for a second night, hitting cities along Israel's coast, including Tel Aviv. At least 8 people have been killed, according to Israeli media, with more than 100 people injured. That followed ongoing attacks by Israel on Iranian nuclear and missile sites.
So, the difference is that it leads off with Iran has hit Israel. It lists the dead in Israel, and when referring to the bombing in Iran, talks about hitting sort of nuclear weapons sites, and doesn't mention any of the number of people killed in Iran. Like, it's just a subtle sort of, is it subtle? But that's the sort of difference that we get. Hey, so what else have I got here? Here's a professor fighting back against the Sky News host. And Joe, while this is playing, I'm just going to disappear and clear my throat. So I'll be back after playing this one. if it fails for some reason.
Professor Morandi, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Did Iran majorly miscalculate? Because even now, President Trump is providing Iran with an off-ramp, telling them to come to the negotiating table. At what point will Iran take that offer?
Well, according to your narrative, Iran always miscalculates. It's a regime. I heard the regime 20 times in the last 10 minutes as I was listening. You sound like TASS news agency upgraded during the Soviet Union. And you say the regime is unpopular and is killing its people. When General Soleimani was murdered by the same Trump that you talk about, millions of people came to the streets of this city, Tehran, that I'm in. So how is it that he's so unpopular? This propaganda that you're producing is only justifying aggression. What the Israeli regime did was aggression. What it did was unjustified aggression. And Netanyahu has been saying for over 30 years, some say up to 40 years, he's been saying that Iran's on the verge of creating a nuclear weapon. And thanks to people like you, he gets away with these lies. But people can go online and check how many times he said.
Professor Morandi, if you could just focus on, I know your narrative and I know the line you take, and we've spoken a number of times, and I'm sure, but if you could just focus on answering the question, in terms of the nuclear talks, on day 60, as far as we know, Donald Trump had said Iran has 60 days. Israel attacked on the 61st day. Can we talk a little bit about the regime's competence levels, the intelligence and security, the competence of your intelligence and security agencies, the fact that Mossad was able to build drone sites in your country, the fact that the leadership was asleep in their beds when they were struck and that you ignored these warnings? Can we talk a little bit about the fact that the regime was taken completely by surprise and top leaders have now been decapitated and killed as a result of the Israeli attack?
Saying regime, I think it helps you contain your contempt for independent countries. You after all, you work for Sky News. It's understandable. But the regime, how do you know that the Israeli regime had bases inside Iran? You're just repeating their propaganda. Of course, Israel for you is not a regime. Sorry, it's a state. But it's a genocidal state carrying out extermination in Gaza. But that's not really important. But how do you know that they're really important? But how do you know that they have
denying that the top commanders have been killed? Are you denying that top commanders were killed?
Oh, so you mean what you're referring to basically is an attack, an act of aggression, that they suddenly fire missiles at civilian targets at apartment buildings and slaughter people in those apartment buildings, slaughtering whole families. For you, that's targeting. That's a really sophisticated act.
But if I can just ask,
excuse me.
Have military facilities been hit? Have nuclear facilities been hit?
One of the buildings that had some of these commanders, one or two of these commanders, was a large apartment building where they killed everyone, 60 people, 20 children. That's not important for people like you, but that's important for people like us. For you, people like you who support ethno-supremacism and the chosen people being able to slaughter and exterminate Palestinians.
Professor Morandi, I'm just trying to get the perspective. We're trying to give you airtime so that you can give us the Iranian perspective on this. And we want to know, and I want to understand, Iran's position here. Will you come to the negotiating table now? Donald Trump, after these series of airstrikes and this attack was launched, called on Iran to come back to the negotiating table. As the spokesperson of the regime, or as someone who worked closely with the negotiating team, do you believe they will come to the negotiating table now?
Well, your regime should know, and your news agency or your TV channel should know better. We were at the negotiating table. It was Trump that conspired with Netanyahu to attack Iran. This is how you twist the truth. You shouldn't invite me because you're easily exposed. Iran was negotiating. Initially, Trump had one position, and so did Witkoff. And then they flipped and said no enrichment. And then they continued the negotiations. And the night before the attack, Trump said that we don't want war. And then after the attack, he said, we're all for it. And you're saying Iran? Is Iran going to come back to the negotiating table? The audacity. Come on. Be a bit, show at least a bit of integrity. A bit of integrity will help.
Okay, Professor Morandi, thanks again for joining us here on the program.
Joe, there's something about me that really enjoys it when people stick it to other people.
What was she expecting?
Well, I guess they have. Well, do they feel like they have to get the other side's version of it? I don't. Yes, I agree. Good on him for just not even just pretending to be civil to her. But he was civil, but just calling it.
He wasn't letting her talk over him.
Yeah, and just calling her out. So good on him. That's what we need. Straight talking. You don't see much of that, unfortunately. Yeah. What else have we got here? More context. I mean, this is so lacking context, the reporting. Like when Iran strikes Israel, they won't even give you the context that it was Israel that struck first.
Mm-hmm.
But just the broader historical context is after the Second World War, the Shah of Iran's father was in charge. And then Mossadegh got elected. And he, Joe, basically
was
looked
going
at
to was going to nationalise the oil fields.
Correct, because they were pulling untold wealth out of the Iranian oil fields, and the deal that had been struck by British Petroleum meant that essentially Iran was getting virtually zero.
Oh, you mean like Australia and the coal?
Indeed.
And the gas.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was so bad. The BP was doing a Woodside back then. And initially, the Americans said, dear listener, get a book called All the Shah's Men, which describes this whole event really in an entertaining fashion. Initially, the Americans said, come on, British, like, we can't give you much sympathy. Like, you're just raping this country. But the British managed to swing them around, where the US sort of came on side. So this was the first CIA-engineered coup and colour revolution, 1952, where Mossadegh, duly elected, doing good things and seemingly a good man, seemingly wasn't there to get the money for himself, but to actually return it to the country and cruel a deal. Dear listener, when evil dictators strike deals with multinationals that allow the multinational to rape the country for decades, it is acceptable for the country to say, hang on a minute, no, we're cancelling that deal. So the CIA with their operative running the show, whose name is so easy to remember, Kermit Roosevelt. What a great name. He orchestrated the coup, and right down to paying for thugs to beat people up on the street and create mayhem. It was the first colour revolution where money and influence from the CIA created a fake Joe. What did you call it? What's that artificial grass term you used?
Astroturfing.
Astroturfing. It wasn't a grassroots movement. It was paid for by the CIA. Dear listener, this is not fanciful conspiracy thinking where Trevor's just bashing the Americans yet again on some spurious sort of thinking. This is well documented. This is admitted to. This is pure fact. It's not contentious, and got Mossadegh overthrown. The original Shah's son, the Shah of Iran, installed, operated as a dictator. Guess what? After a while, the country gets jack of him, and the only way of organising opposition to a dictator is through religious mosques, and we get the Ayatollah coming to power and then installing a theocracy, and that's where we get to Iran today. And, when you see photos and video of Iran in the 50s, it looked fantastic. And, of course, Iranians are Persian rather than Arabic, so they see themselves as different in that respect. And I am sure I'm not sure, but imagine if Mossadegh had been allowed to just do what people wanted him to do. If he'd been able to get that oil income, we wouldn't have necessarily had the theocracy and all of the shit that's happened since. So it all, bear that in mind when people think, these Arab countries, even though it's technically Persian, they're always in such a mess. Can't they get themselves organised? It's because they're not allowed to. That these get into this state, and So then, of course, as we mentioned before, Obama had a deal which was canned by Trump. The sanctions returned. And, of course, in 2020, the Trump administration killed the Iranian Major General Soleimani, leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And it was soon after that Tehran announced it would no longer abide by its enrichment commitments under the deal. Like, how better to kill a deal than to say, well, as far as we're concerned, the deal's off and the sanctions are back, and then assassinating the leader. Mm. How much patience do they think the Iranians have? But at the time, Tehran said it would return to compliance if the other parties did so and met their commitments on sanctions relief. So despite reneging on the deal and assassinating the leader of their Revolutionary Guard Corps, they were prepared to go back to the deal if everybody else would. And then Israel in 2020 assassinated another nuclear scientist, and despite those assassinations, Iran was negotiating. And what have I got here? Trump's decision in 2018 to walk away was a historic and utter failure. He was influenced by Mike Pompeo, who we've never really mentioned much, but we have mentioned John Bolton. Mm-hmm. He's the guy with the very thick moustache.
I've seen him interviewed quite a few times recently about Trump.
We've played stuff with him where he's admitted his line was, regime change is not easy, or coups, a successful coup is not easy. And I should know, I've organised a few. Remember that one? No. That was John Bolton. Mm-hmm. So he's never seen a coup orchestrated by the US that he didn't like. He's into coups, and it wasn't the Batuta or the Shovel, but one of those type of outlets had a headline: John Bolton hospitalised by 5-hour erection after reading about Israel bombing Iran. So, yeah, it's probably true, I think.
If you have a 5-hour erection, you should go to hospital. Public service announcement.
That's right.
It's not a good thing.
Hopefully you don't get one because you're
excited about Iran being bombed
by revolutions. But yes, by coups. But I think John Bolton would be. That seems quite plausible, that story, actually.
Kissinger too, I'm sure.
So, they've had Iran in their sights for a while. All of this, of course, it's not just Israel operating on its own. Everything is done with the consent of the USA. They're supplying the weapons, and Trump, afterwards says, it was excellent. But this is just Iran is the last piece of a list of countries that they've been aiming for a long time. And now I'm just going to try and find this video of Wesley Clark. Let me just add a scene here, Joe, because this thing disappears from me if I don't have it in. Bear with me one second, dear listener. I'm going to get this video up and running in a second.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld.
Sorry, I should tell you who this guy is. He is former general of the US Army, Wesley Clark. That's fairly high up. Here we go.
And Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, we're going to war with Iraq. Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
There we go. Iran was on the list. They finally got to it. Pretty sure they got to all the other countries on the list. So, yeah. What else have I got? Joe, obviously the US has provided intelligence. They've provided weapons. It seems that they have provided equipment for intercepting the missiles that Iran has been sending towards Israel.
Oh, the Iron Dome.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because they were sort of intercepting him sort of earlier than that as well. What Israel really needs is for the US to get involved in directly flying over Iran and dropping bombs. Because apparently a lot of the nuclear facilities are
deep underground,
and these bunker-busting bombs that you need are extremely heavy, and you need a lot of air power because you've got to refuel the planes a lot in order to get to Iran because they're so heavy. And anyway, to effectively blow up these things, you'd need the Americans to do it, it seems. Call me crazy, Joe, but a false flag operation where, I don't know, a missile seemingly comes from Iran and lands on some US Army base somewhere in the Middle East. God knows there's enough of them. And they could say, look, Iran's now escalated this and is now attacking US facilities, and try and drag the US into a more aggressive posture. What do you think? If you were an Israeli...
Oh, you think the Israelis are going to attack the US?
Well, the Israelis would do a false flag operation. Yeah. Do you think that that's on the cards?
Oh, anything's possible with the Israelis if it suits their aims.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I think. Anyway, of course, at the same time, Joe, this distracts from Gaza. So the world's attention is now moving from the genocide and mass starvation in Gaza because we're all looking at Iran and you know, thinking about that. So back in Gaza, internet connection has been completely shut down. So it's now increasingly difficult for images to come out of the atrocities that are occurring there. You still see some, dear listener. God, it's hard. Kids starving, kids saying goodbye to their siblings who are dead and mangled, their parents who are dead and mangled. They're all skinny as, they're starving, and it's all happening as intended. They're being herded into smaller and smaller compounds, and when they go to get food, they get shot. And meanwhile, Israelis cry because their dog is distressed by the bombing sounds in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
What else have I got here? Yeah. A tweet by the Israeli Defense Force Israeli civilians are currently being targeted by the Iranian regime. The world cannot stay silent. Also, Joe, remember they said that those evil Gazans were putting military headquarters under hospitals?
Mm-hmm.
So Israel's Channel 13 reported the War Cabinet meeting tonight will take place in the new IDF fortified HQ under Ichalov Hospital that is safe from Iranian missiles after Defence Ministry was struck last night, which is no longer safe. So the Israelis have their War Cabinet infrastructure under a hospital in Tel Aviv.
Human shields.
Other media responses. So I mentioned the Sunday Mail had nothing on its front page. Monday's The Australian headline, Iran is bombing our civilians. Super supportive of Israel, and you never saw anything like that in respect of the poor Palestinians in Gaza. What else have we got? How close to a bomb? Let me see. Are you still there, Joe? Yes. No, Joe's might have disappeared momentarily. No, Joe's.
Yeah, it looks like my internet dropped out for some reason.
Oh, okay. What did I was just about to say a bit more about how close they are to a bomb. This is from Responsible Statecraft. I put these notes in a while ago, dear listener, but I think this is going to be relevant. So, there's a difference between having weapons-grade uranium and actually having weapons, because once you've got the uranium, you've still got to put it onto some sort of vehicle to carry it. So,
well, I did see an interesting article that said if you ask somebody who enriches uranium, they'd say, oh, the easy bit's the enriching of the uranium, the hard bit is building the bomb. But if you asked someone who assembles bombs, he'd say the easy bit is the assembling the bomb, it's the getting the uranium that's the hard bit.
Fair enough. So the US government estimated in March 2022 that Iran would need as little as 1 week to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for one nuclear weapon, according to State Department official. During March 2023 congressional hearing, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff testified Iran could produce this amount of enriched uranium in approximately 10 to 15 days. In its 2024 annual threat assessment, Director of National Intelligence concluded Tehran has the infrastructure and experience to quickly produce weapons-grade uranium if it chooses to do so. March 24, France, Germany and the UK estimated Iran had acquired enough highly enriched uranium that, if enriched further to 90%, would theoretically be enough for 3 nuclear explosive devices. So there is great uncertainty about how long it would take Iran to build a nuclear weapon once it has the required weapons-grade uranium. Such steps, referred to as weaponization, include producing uranium metal, shaping it into bomb parts, producing high explosives and electronics, and fitting it all into a device that could be used for a demonstration test. It would presumably take longer to produce a bomb that could be delivered by aircraft or a warhead small enough to fit into a ballistic missile. According to official US assessments, Iran halted its nuclear weapons program in late 2003 and has not resumed it. Reportedly, this program's goal was to develop an implosion-style nuclear weapon, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, if you're reading material, dear listener, about how quickly Iran could gear up a nuclear weapon, you have to distinguish, are you reading about getting the necessary enriched uranium, or are you reading about the actual triggering and missile that it would have to be attached to?
And I'm not sure how they're enriching this uranium, given that the Americans/Israelis destroyed the centrifuges.
I don't know either. What has been the Australian response? Penny Wong, Foreign Minister. Israel has a right to self-defence. She's told the ABC Insiders. Quote, "We know Iran is a threat. We know that its nuclear program poses a threat to international peace and obviously to Israel. But Israel has a right to self-defense." And Richard Marles, Israel does have a right to self-defense, but we understand the risk that the Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile program represents. Pathetic. Pathetic, Joe. This is the stuff I would have expected from the Scott Morrison government. It's a fucking Labor government. Oh, what does our opposition say? Susan Ley and Michaela Cash. I guess if we were wondering what ScoMo would have said. "The world can never accept a nuclear-armed Iran. We express our strong support for our wonderful Jewish community in Australia, as well as our deepest sympathies for Iranian Australians. The targeting of Israeli population centres by the Iranian regime is deeply troubling."
Interestingly enough, the Iranians that I've met have all referred to themselves as Persians.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, strong support from them. What do other countries say? China. Beijing opposes actions that violate Iran's sovereignty, security and territorial integrity. Russia, Joe, says it's a violation of the Charter of the United Nations and international law.
Yes.
So far, I'm approving of the Chinese and Russian response more than our own governments.
Well,
Oman,
the Russians are being very hypocritical, aren't they?
Indeed, you could accuse them of that. But Oman calls it illegal, unjustifiable, grave threat to regional stability. Saudi Arabia, a long-time rival of Tehran, because the Saudis are Sunni and the Iranians are Shia. But the long-term rival, Saudi Arabia, said strong condemnation for what's happened. Iraq filed a complaint with the United Nations. Japanese government strongly condemned the Israeli air raids as totally intolerable. South Korea said something similar. European states have been much less critical of Israel. The German Foreign Minister, Johann Waldefel, declared that Israel has a right to defend its existence.
Well, Germany has been a sop to Israel since the late 40s, hasn't it?
It has. Here's what the German Foreign Office Twitter feed said. "We strongly condemn the indiscriminate Iranian attack on Israeli territory. Iran's nuclear program violates the Non-Proliferation Treaty and poses a threat to the entire region, especially to Israel." We've already mentioned, dear listener, that Israel has its own nuclear program that violates the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Oh, but that's purely for defence.
And given the way the Israeli Zionists carry on, I think they are a serious threat to the entire region, that being in their hands. Again, Macron talked about the attack on Iran was an act of self-defense, is how he described Israel's actions. What else have I got here? What is Trump's reaction? Trump endorsed the massive Israeli strike, calling the attack excellent. He said, "I think it's been excellent. We gave them a chance and they didn't take it. They got hit hard, very hard. They got hit about as hard as you're going to get hit. And there's more to come, a lot more."
Yeah, he wants them to possibly buy some of his cryptocurrency or maybe stay in his hotels. And then he'll grant them an audience.
Yeah. This is the sort of tweet that we get from the President of the United States these days. "I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them, in the strongest of words, to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world, and in capitals, by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead, capital letters for dead, now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction.
Never known as the Iranian Empire.
No, that's exact. I know. And in capitals, in closing, just do it before it's too late. God bless you all.
Well, his base love it. His base want war in the Middle East because it brings about the end times.
Yeah,
and Jesus will come back.
Because they don't like spending money on foreign aid, which they would. Yeah, but you're right. The Christian faith that so many of them follow calls for it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
God. Vladimir Putin summed it up. No US president truly holds power. And now even Donald Trump, once the loudmouth promising peace, shows his true colours by backing attacks on Iran. Just another puppet controlled by the deep state, serving the machine while pretending to lead. I think Vladimir got that right.
Yeah, if you've seen Trump's proposed military parade,
yes,
where he was trying to, he looks up to Putin. He sees him as a strong leader who's managed to turn his country into a profit center for himself. Probably the richest man in the world, and Trump admires him for that.
What you're saying? Putin's the most richest man in the world?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
No. I've in the biography I read, which referenced CIA reports, that they do not see him as having absconded with a lot of personal wealth out of the Russian system. And that was the US Secret Intelligence Services.
A lot of it is owned by very poor people who happen to be family members, or
they would have said that.
His childhood plague.
Yeah. Anyway, up for grabs that one, Joe. And we can agree to differ on that one. Well, let's talk a little bit about Trump and AUKUS type stuff. Joe, you got to go? Are you right for another little bit?
No.
All right. Okay. So that's kind of most of what I want to say about Israel and Iran. So what have we got here in the chat before I leave it? Israel has never signed the treaty, so it can't violate it. Well, that's true, I guess, in the same way that the US never signed the Law of the Sea treaties. So I guess can never violate them.
Or the International Criminal Court treaties.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Have we seen the AI videos of Trump on YouTube? Yes, they are good.
Only the Trump Gaza.
Yeah.
I try not to watch AI-generated stuff.
Yeah. What else is in here? Chris, can anyone explain to me why calling Israel genocidal murderers is somehow anti-Semitic? How did Israel entwine the Jewish religion and the nation of Israel as the same thing? Yep.
Well, in the same way that Islamophobia has come to mean a valid criticism of the religion as opposed to an unhealthy fear of brown people.
Indeed. Just sort of debate trickery, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah, AUKUS. So,
Oh, yes. Trump has
over in
decided that really it's not a good idea.
who has?
Trump.
No, he hasn't yet. It's being reviewed.
He's considering it, yes.
Well, I don't think he is, Joe.
Fine.
Apparently, some of the people in the Pentagon or wherever
Mhm.
are looking at the AUKUS deal, and it's being reviewed.
Yes.
Officially reviewed in some capacity. And a lot of people in Australia who hate AUKUS are thinking maybe the Americans will save us from it by canning it from their point of view anyway, because they simply can't generate the subs.
Yeah.
And that they'll cancel it, even though our own leaders should have cancelled it ages ago. Maybe we'll get lucky and the
Maybe
US
before
will...
they paid him however many millions.
Yeah. But there's more to be paid, Joe. And as soon as it is explained to Donald Trump that these schmucks
Are paying
excuse the
money
Yiddish,
for nothing.
in
and the chicks
Australia
for free.
are going to be handing money over and at any time, and will continue to hand the money over for the next decades, and at any time the US can say, sorry, no sub for you.
Yeah,
And
but he didn't negotiate it.
But he would love the money. Like he would go, you mean these guys are sending us money, we don't have to send them a sub? And after a while we can tell them, sorry, no sub, and we keep the money? And they'll go, yeah.
It's not going into his pocket and it doesn't make him look good. Why does he care?
Because it's a deal that he could only dream of in private enterprise.
Well,
I think
but
he sees that as a deal for
I can see him
America.
scrapping it just so that he can negotiate a new one.
I hope you're right, but I could just see him just going, what idiots signed up to this? If they're going to keep sending us money, we'll keep taking it.
It's probably the same idiot that signed up to the Canadian deal that he threw out? The one that he'd signed in his previous term of office.
Oh, yes. He declared it as the worst deal ever.
Yes.
And it was a deal that he'd actually done. Yeah. So, as the Shovel headline said, Trump to review deal where Australia pays America $350 billion for submarines it will never receive to ensure it's America first. He's going to take one look at it and go, I'm not cancelling that deal. Yeah. So it is officially being looked at. What does the opposition say about this? Opposition leader Susan Lee, Coalition Defence spokesman Angus Taylor, both pledged bipartisan support for the AUKUS agreement. Mr. Taylor adding the government had serious questions to answer, Joe. This included whether Australia's reluctance to meet, background story, dear listener, the US has been telling all of its allies, including Australia, that as a bare minimum, we should be spending 3.5% of GDP on defence in our budget. And Richard Marles, Defence Minister, was like, oh, yes, I'm happy to have that conversation with the US. Albo apparently said, hold your horses, we decide what we spend on defence, and we're not going to be told by another country how much to spend. And so
apparently the US only spends 3.1%, I think it was.
Yeah. You know, the problem is, Joe, they get the sort of corruption endemic in the system means that they don't get much bang for their buck for their money. So anyway, so this is where Angus Taylor said about serious questions to answer, Albanese. This included whether Australia's reluctance to meet the 3.5% of GDP in defence funding demanded by the US, and also our sanctioning of 2 Israeli ministers, whether that played a role in the review. And according, and quote Angus Taylor, we need to know to what extent was the review triggered by Labor's failure to fund defence in this country to the level that the US and other partners think is appropriate, he said. Like, this fuckwit, Angus Taylor, is saying, Albanese's got a lot to answer. Maybe this review of AUKUS is because we're not doing what the Americans want us to do in terms of defence spending. It beggars belief, Joe. Like, what sort of... Already this was the worst deal ever. $350 billion for this, $368 billion for these subs that we're never going to get. Now, on top of that, we're being told we have to spend 3.5% on defence of our, just to keep the US happy, so that they don't cancel the deal. That's already a dog of a deal. I didn't think it could get worse, Joe. But this is the thinking of just dickheads like Angus Taylor. God help us.
Rupert Murdoch wants that, so.
God help us, Joe.
He doesn't exist.
He doesn't, but clearly. Oh, maybe here's some advice from maybe Angus Taylor and Susan Lay are just way off beam. Nobody else thinks that way. Maybe it's just them. I wonder what the Sydney Morning Herald has to say. I wonder what James Massola in the Sydney Morning Herald has to say. Maybe something sensible. Let's see. He says, Albanese must make Trump an offer he can't refuse. The Prime Minister needs to make AUKUS great again by supersizing the existing deal and offering the Trump administration more than what was agreed to under Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden.
No, I think we should do the other way of a deal he can't refuse, which is put a dead horse's head in his bed.
Honestly, Joe, the level of incompetence and shitfuckery by these people in positions of some power.
Hey, we're getting screwed over by the Americans. Let's renegotiate the deal so we get even more screwed over.
It is mind-boggling. We are in just a dystopian Orwellian world where...
Yeah, I was listening to UK defence journalists talking about AUKUS and how they can't believe that we ever signed up for such a thing.
Yeah, I think I heard a similar thing. Chris in the chat, 3.5% GDP spending would, of course, mandate the use of US military suppliers, of course.
Well, I did hear an argument that we should actually be buying technology from Ukraine.
Right.
One, they need the cash flow, and two, they're actually world leaders now in some specific weaponry.
Could be.
Innovative use of trucks with drones in the back of them.
Okay, they're sort of drone experts.
Oh, did you not see the spider's web attack?
Which one was that?
The one where they attacked 6, I think it was, Russian airfields across the whole of Russia.
Is this
even
where
up
they
in
had...
Siberia?
Right. I heard something along
that. They'd basically built... it sounded like wooden huts that might have been part of a house, and told some naive truck drivers, we needed to deliver this here at this date and time.
Right.
And as they pulled up, apparently the top opened up and 20 drones popped out of each of these huts and went off and destroyed a whole bunch of strategic Russian bombers on the ground.
Right. I did hear something. I got half that story. I didn't get the full story.
Well,
right,
there was that, and then 2 days later there was the attack on the Kerch Bridge.
Right. There we go. Of course, the other thing we could spend the money on, 3.5%, would just buy stuff from China. They make good military stuff, nice and cheap.
Yeah, but they're worried about the kill switch, aren't they?
Yeah. What else have we got here? What are they saying in the UK? Well, the meltdown of the UK part of AUKUS is finally getting attention. We have the former First Sea Lord, great title, Joe, saying that the UK does not have capacity to build AUKUS subs. He says Australia should not expect the SSN AUKUS to arrive on time or budget. I think any sensible defence calculation will be that these things will be more expensive and later than is currently expected. Yeah.
And then there's a whole question as to who's going to maintain the power plants.
Yeah.
Because Australia doesn't have the experience.
Indeed. Joe. The disunited states of America, we've got ICE agents out of control, just walking into...
You're telling me that police officers who are allowed to have no insignia on their uniforms, no form of identification of who they are, might behave in a bad way when there's no comeback as to what they've been doing?
Like, how are these people supposed to react, as you say, when people without any obvious authority, they could be just criminals, come in and start...
There have already been criminals breaking into people's houses disguised as ICE agents.
No doubt. So...
Did you see the journalists being shot at deliberately with less than lethal rounds?
Yes, the Australian journalists, yes, I did see that.
It wasn't just the Australian. There's a British journalist who has had to have an operation on his leg, the damage. So he's still got a drain in there and it's going to be some time before he's recovered. And then there was another journalist, I think an American. Somebody got shot in the head. That was right. They had a great big bruise on their forehead. Because, of course, less than lethal rounds are supposed to be shot at the ground to bounce off, to reduce. Because in Northern Ireland, a number of people were killed by being shot in the chest by them. Stop the heart.
Yeah, well, and of course, if it got you anywhere in the head, take out an eye or hit you on the temple, it could kill you, or the neck or something like that. Anything.
And in Northern Ireland, they had the IRA snipers taking pot shots at the police.
Right.
Which obviously they don't have in the US, but maybe they should have.
How bad is it over there? Here's Rachel Maddow, I think, describing what sort of things are happening in the US right now.
Guess who the geniuses were who so nimbly managed this operation at a popular Italian restaurant in the lovely Balboa Park neighborhood of San Diego this weekend? Somebody apparently told these guys from Homeland Security Investigations that they were going to be invading Fallujah on Friday afternoon, right? I mean, this was bananas. This is a popular Italian restaurant in San Diego. Just as they were opening for dinner on a beautiful Friday afternoon, multiple clown cars full of Trump's HSI agents in full battle rattle with helmets and long guns and flak jackets and goggles and masks and the whole thing. I mean, literally looking like they were going to rappel out of helicopters into the Tora Bora cave complex to fight Al-Qaeda. These guys dressed like this run into a neighborhood Italian restaurant and reportedly handcuffed the entire crew working at the restaurant, everybody inside. And then they arrested people who were like, you know, busboys and waiters and stuff. And then, unsurprisingly, the whole neighborhood came out to say, what the heck are you doing? Is this Red Dawn? Are we being invaded, Wolverines? This is what you're doing to save us from the terrible menace of, like, the nice waiter at our favorite local restaurant? Trump's immigration agents had no idea what to do.
Get out of here! Cowards! Cowards! Cowards!
You should be embarrassed! You should be so embarrassed! Look at your face! Look at your face!
These Trump immigration agents, dressed up like soldiers, they made this San Diego street corner look like they were in a war zone because they were so completely unprepared and untrained and flummoxed by all of the neighbors and passersby, understandably, yelling at them and telling them to leave people alone. They were so scared and so unprepared and so untrained for this completely predictable situation that they set off multiple, what appeared to be these flashbang smoke grenades against the random neighbors.
Who wants to go to America? Like, well, the United States, the disunited states of America. What a shocking,
Well, did you
terrible
see the
country.
Australian who was saying he got pulled over by immigration at the airport? This is the last week or so. and quizzed about his deleted social media posts that were anti-Israel.
Wow.
Basically, complaining of the Palestinian genocide.
Honestly, if you had to go for business, you'd take some sort of burner phone or something, wouldn't you?
Well, no, he said it didn't matter.
Oh, okay.
They'd flagged his name. They'd found his social media profile. They'd archived his old posts. This wasn't even current.
Yep.
He deleted everything before he crossed the border. They had a record of it already.
Are you suggesting that perhaps I'll never go to the United States ever again, Joe?
Well, certainly under Trump's regime.
It's just a combination of Hunger Games, Orwellian stuff, Handmaid's Tale. It's just.
Did you see about the No Kings protest?
Yes, I did.
Which, of course, apparently are in 0 newspapers and 0 television reports. So they were covering the military parade that wasn't a military parade, but refused to acknowledge the No Kings protests across hundreds of cities in the US.
No Kings protest because Donald Trump considers himself a king. And
basically
he
believes he's above the law.
Yes. So the military parade, when he was in his first term, I think he was in France on Bastille Day and was enormously impressed by the parade at the time and decided he wanted one. And in his first term wanted to organise one, and they turned him down because they said the military equipment would just basically ruin the roads of Washington if they were allowed to trundle all over it. And he just at the time didn't know enough to force the issue. Right. But this time he did and got his parade. But, Joe, when you see pictures of the Chinese, Russian, North Korean militaries as they march past, and it's all precision marching, stiff, formal, regimented. Dear listener, if you ever get the chance to look up some of the videos of the ragtag sort of misfits in camouflage outfits representing the United States as they just walked along, it's pathetic. What's this commentator said? I've never watched a military parade in my life, but the footage emanating from the US today is truly absolutely fucking pathetic. Bunch of unarmed
soldiers.
What's that?
It's like 100 soldiers.
Yeah.
And a couple of donkeys and carts or something.
Not even pretending to march in time. Bunch of unarmed soldiers barely able to walk in formation, shuffling forward to set to country rock with tiny silent crowds spectating. Yeah, there's really weird background music and a commentator like you'd expect in an Olympic Games type commentary. It was very odd and extremely pathetic.
I'm surprised it wasn't YMCA, actually.
Yes. The Shovel had a headline, Trump's military parade cancelled after 20,000 troops suffer debilitating bone spurs.
I saw that.
It didn't actually happen that way.
That's a reference to Trump's
Trump
Vietnam
getting out of the army.
Draft dodge, yes.
Yeah, draft dodging, yeah. What I did have here was just another Trump fun thing. So this is a guy who was working in the White House with Trump. You can just imagine how chaotic that place must be. Here's what he had to say.
He's an idiot. He's just an idiot. When Donald Trump was president, I remember crossing that threshold into the Oval Office. And not only was this guy not bringing his A game, he didn't have a game. He was winging it.
Miles Taylor and his Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen worked for former President Trump in his administration. Trump once called Secretary Nielsen with a unique solution to stop migrants crossing the border with Mexico.
And she puts the president on speakerphone, and he says that down at the border, he wants to explore what it would take to build a moat. And he goes off on this tangent talking about how we should actually get snakes and alligators and fill this 2,000-mile moat on the border with reptilian creatures so that if someone falls into the moat, they're facing the threat of snakes and alligators. I mean, we're just laughing. You can't make this shit up.
What are you thinking when the President of the United States is enunciating this idea?
I'm a lifelong conservative. I am more Republican than Donald Trump. He is not a conservative. But putting politics aside, engaging with the man, you realize he's an idiot.
Trump has denied knowing Taylor and said he should be prosecuted.
Of course he has.
Yeah,
when reality comes to bite you on the arse, just deny reality.
Snakes,
Yeah.
alligators, that'll stop them.
Well, you see, Trump's a city boy. I don't think he's ever been out in the countryside in his life.
He's just an idiot.
Well, that too.
Yeah. And he's surrounded by idiots.
But he's a hyperactive idiot.
Yes. Yeah. Ah, there we go. That's probably a good note to end on, I think, on the state of the world. Thank you in the chat room. You've been active in there. Chris in particular. John, as always. Hope your knee is recovering well, John. Still owe you that beer because of those damn North Korean soldiers. And technically not in the Ukraine, but anyway, it's definitely payable. We will be back next week. I'm sure of it. I think I've got this workload from this crazy chairman's job now a bit more under control. So at the moment, it's still a weekly podcast, but if we don't make it sometimes, don't be surprised. Anyway, I'll be back next week. Joe will be back. I think Scott's away for another week. And anyway, we'll talk to you then. Bye for now.
And it's a good night.